just want to bring Steve Smith in here for a moment because he's been racing today in a rather unique Beetle. Is that right?
1965 VW Bug. It's always.
It was kind of the odd one out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of one of the only ones you'll ever see vintage racing.
What was the story? Why did you enter, and what's the story behind the car?
So the Trans Am U2 and 2.5 Challenge guys reached out to me back in April to kind of come join their group because apparently two guys raced Beetles in the '69 season of Trans Am.
Oh, okay.
And they heard about this weirdo racing one up in Portland, and they're like, "Oh, we'd love to have that car. Will you come join us?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be kind of fun."
That's a fun phone call to get.
Yeah. So.
How was it then?
Oh God! I came in April, and the whole weekend was an absolute disaster. I blew the engine. The alternator died. The battery died. It was the experience of the race itself was amazing. But the car was just a disaster. So they were like, well, we've got another race at Laguna Seca coming up in October at the Velocity Invitational, come down again for that. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So I got my backup motor, put that in, and ran the Portland Historics back home, and then kind of left the car alone till I got here. And it's amazing. I mean, Laguna Seca is one-of-a-kind track, and I was here at the 2011 Historics racing that car, and that's what's cool about that car. It's the first and only Beetle at the Monterey Historics as well. So it's kind of a special little car, special to me.
Yeah, and you enjoyed this weekend?
Oh, so much fun. I mean, I'm going to do Velocity next year without a doubt. No matter. So.
Well, listen, thanks for coming in. We're about to turn our attention to Formula One. I've got a single-seater driver expert alongside you. This is Benjamin Peterson. I'm going to bring Sam Smith in. We're going to go from Steve Smith to Sam Smith. So thanks for coming in. We'll talk to you again when you come back.
Yeah, no worries.
But I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and it's nice to find out why you were here. Because I kept looking and going, well, that's a bit odd.
Yeah, it's always a bit odd. It's a Beetle.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Well, now we turn our attention to what has been one of the highlights of the weekend, without a doubt. And, of course, it is McLaren Formula One. I've got Benjamin Peterson in here once again. And the reason I've dragged him in, because he's really here to do rally. But I know that he's kind of looking envious at these cars because, obviously, these are the elite of Formula One. And there's so much history. Benjamin, your good buddy Pat O'Ward is out there, or your rival, I should say. You raced for AJ Foyt, he races for our McLaren. He was up here talking to us, and he was grinning ear to ear, and I'm sure you are too from your rally experience today. But what are your thoughts on what you're looking at here?
I mean, I want to take my headset off right now and just listen to the car. It sounds so good. No, I spoke to Pato earlier today. He showed me the famous Senna car he was driving. And it's so simple. Like, looking at just the beauty of how simple it is, it's pretty breathtaking. And
there is Pato.
Yeah, he's getting ready to hop in the car, but just really excited for him. I mean, what a special thing to be able to drive that car around here. Me, on the other hand, I drove a Pikes Peak hill climb car today, which was a bit different from what I've ever tried around here. But no, it was super, super fun, and just looking at the screens here, I mean, it's just a beautiful car on track right now.
Well, I'm going to bring a fellow journalist in as well, Sam Smith. Meet Benjamin.
Nice to meet you.
He's
How you doing?
He's going to be tearing up at IndyCar next year, and I wanted him to join us for these very special moments of what has been definitely the spectacle of the weekend, to see these Formula One cars that Zach's brought out and enjoy it. But Sam, what's your take on the weekend?
Oh God, it's been fantastic. And one of the best parts about it has been seeing these cars run, right? And seeing them run not just at a walking pace. You know, I was at Road and Track for about 8 years, and while I was there, I was lucky enough to test an ex-Alonso McLaren F1 car. And one of the things that I came away with is just how much they are spaceships, right? They are deeply complex. They take crew of people to run. They're just massively complicated, wonderful little jewels, and every single piece of the car is FEA'd and kind of designed and burrowed down to its absolute best. And then you get in it, and there is an otherworldly component to driving it. It's a remarkable thing, and it's a remarkable thing to be able to see these running here.
We're looking at Charlie Nürburgring, who's got actually a land speed record under his belt.
400 miles an hour,
I know,
right?
Is that ridiculous? Or
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's getting up there in age, and I was surprised to see him in this modern car. This is a car that Jenson Button and Checo Perez drove back in the day, and it wasn't the most successful of McLarens, but it sounds just absolutely awesome. And I wanted to bring a single-seater expert in Benjamin here just to talk us through. I mean, just give us an idea. I mean, your IndyCar team, how many, for example, are working on your car of an IndyCar day?
I think we're about 6 to 7 guys per car, but I mean, I was in the pit lane earlier today just for a show car like today for these F1 cars. That's quite the crew just to run them. But I mean, yeah, it's a lot of people that go into running cars like these. It's not just a plug it in and go kind of car. But yeah, they're pretty breathtaking.
Growing up in Denmark, when you first heard of Formula One, because I know growing up as a European, you must have been a fan. What was your sort of first inklings of Formula One?
You know, it's my first taste of F1 that I saw as growing up as a kid. In person would have been kind of the, this car that we're watching right now, but like kind of the V8 era.
Okay.
Even the car Mario was driving earlier, that was my first impression of F1 in person. So they just sound so good.
Yeah, I know. We long for the V10 days, I think.
Absolutely.
I had a chance yesterday to talk to Indy Lalv, head of McLaren F1's Heritage Program. They travel around, they bring these cars in, they run them for certain very fortunate individuals who have, have the means to make it happen. And I was asking him, because one of the great things about these cars is the load that they put on you and how much skill it takes to drive them at the limit. And he was saying that, especially with a blown diffuser car like this, a lot of it is teaching the drivers and the owners how to work up to simply get the car going fast enough to where it works, right? The way the aerodynamics work on any F1 car requires a certain amount of commitment and speed in the corner, but the blown diffuser cars especially, they are not producing max downforce until they are right at the absolute limit. And he said it's been really interesting watching everyone work up to it and talking with the guys who own the cars. And Charlie, in particular, is an excellent driver, but watching those guys get up to it, he said it was interesting watching their eyes open and just kind of having them slowly realize just what the cars are capable of. It's remarkable.
And Benjamin, give us an idea. I mean, we're looking at this F1 Le Mans car here. Once you get to this level of cars, I mean, the precision and the technology involved in these high-end cars, you're about to do a full season with AJ Foyt Racing, and that's going to take you to the next level, and I'm so excited for you. But, I mean, it really is next level, and it just, give the audience a little insight into what it's like to be racing at the top level.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, I want to give an appreciation out to the guys driving the F1 cars today for the fact that there's no tire warmers on the car. Right. I saw that earlier. That is pretty, it's insane, I would say. But, they stayed on track and letting the tires build heat. But in F1, they use tire warmers all the time. So that would be tricky to have that caliber car with no tire warmers here, for sure. But I mean, these cars that perform at such a high level, same thing with the IndyCar, they do everything so well. So to be at the absolute limit, you really have to be at a high commitment level for sure. But when it does everything so well, when you make changes on the car, it's like these very little minute things that you can feel is making a difference because they're just so precise to start with. But when you really start to push them, everything kind of starts to slow down, and now you feel bigger changes taking effect as well, and they're so fun to drive.
Yeah, that's the one thing. I was lucky enough to go in a two-seater Minardi with Damon Hill once at Donington Park, and it was wet, and I didn't think anything of it. I knew Damon pretty well, and it was a chance of a lifetime. I had a medical, I did all the rest of it. But he talked to me afterwards, and he said he was, in his words, scared shitless. And I said, Damon, don't, you can't lose language on an interview like that. And he said, no, I was worried for you. He said, because you were behind me. And he said, these cars don't run very well and stable at slow conditions. And he said, I couldn't get the tires up to temperature because it was wet. I was worried about going too fast because of slipping and going off the track, and your legs around mine in the Minardi the way it was, I'd have broken your leg immediately. And I was like, I'm glad you didn't tell me any of this before we went out. But it's a really good point. These cars really only perform at speed. You can't drive them slowly. It's dangerous to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the topic of feet, it was funny earlier today in the Pikes Peak car, I brought Steve Rimmer, the owner of Dirtfish, who brought all the cars down for a ride in my car, and his leg was right up alongside the gearbox. So when we were in the corner, sometimes it would hit the side of the gearbox where it was just so hot, and he didn't want to think that he was scared of the driving. He was just burning his leg on the side of the transmission. So he told me afterwards, like, just for the record, I wasn't scared. I was just burning my leg on the gearbox. So that was pretty funny, but yeah, they're just breathtaking cars around here.
That's been one of the really neat things, watching America kind of wake up to Formula One in the wake of the Netflix show, right? You know, it turned on so many people to the intricacies of the sport, not just how it works and how the people work, but what the cars require to drive hard. But there are so many little interesting trivia bits, right? You know, the fact that the engines literally will not turn over until they are warm. So they are plugged into oil and coolant carts the night before or several hours before to get them hot enough simply so they can turn, because the clearances are that tight. Every little bit of these things is so alien to the American audience that, you know, there's just so much interesting to learn about it. It's fantastic. Yeah,
a week away from Austin, I think you're right. The Netflix show has, without a doubt, blown up Formula One in this country. And to have accolades like Mario Andretti driving, just a footnote, as a journalist, you've got to have loved seeing that this weekend, and seeing Mario doing that this weekend.
Yeah, there was something about it, right? You know, we have, America in particular, we have so few household name Formula One drivers. Mario, Phil Hill, you know, and really Mario was at the peak of it, right? My grandmother knew who Mario Andretti was, and she barely knew what a car was. You know, on a certain level, when you see that guy there, and he was not going slow, he was on it. It was just this life-affirming moment to watch him strap into the thing. And I was in the garage before it happened, and I saw the look on his face. He was talking to Zach Brown and Bruce Canepa, and I watched both of them standing there. And every so often, he'd sneak a look at the car and just kind of smile like a little kid. And it was Mario. The guy's a titan. And when you see somebody like that getting excited, you know it's pretty special.
Yeah, no kidding. How about this car? I don't know how much you know about it, but I was always impressed because growing up in England, watching McLaren be so successful in Formula One, I actually thought Ron Dennis was kind of losing it a little bit to go and suddenly say, well, I think I'll build a sports car to take on Ferrari and go to Le Mans. And I don't mean that rudely to him, because I had so much admiration for what they do at Woking, and I've been there and I've interviewed Ron, and I saw all the cars out there on display and their accolades of history and the trophies. But I just thought, come on, this is a bit of a stretch to go and build your own production car when it's being done so well by the Italians and the Germans. And yet, that was a real step to go to Le Mans. It was almost Ford versus Ferrari-like, the way they did it.
It's such a remarkable program, right? You know, I've met many of the people who worked on that car, some of whom are still in Woking, right? Still at McLaren. Yeah. And it was this weird little skunk works that came together around that car. Several years ago, I was lucky enough to test one of the BMW factory cars, an F1 GTR, and talking to the people in the program, one of the really interesting things they said was that, you know, the race car program was almost an accident. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to put it together. Gordon didn't design the car to be a racing car. It was a road car first and foremost, and so there are all these things they had to get around to make the car work.
But I'm going to pause you there. I want you to finish that story because Taylor's about to talk to Charlie, who's just got out of the car brimming from ear to ear. So down to you, Taylor.
I am down here on the pit lane. Charles, you just hopped out of that car. You've ridden everything from Ferraris and Le Mans race to IndyCar. How did this compare?
Well, it's a real privilege to get to drive a car like this, and it's otherworldly in a way. You know, Lewis Hamilton won the Chinese Grand Prix with this car, and Jenson Button was second at India with this car. So two British world champions, you know, were on the, you know, it's a real privilege, and I cherish every minute of it. And you know, these guys do such a great job, and I appreciate Jeff and Velocity giving us a chance to run them.
Absolutely, and I can tell you're just grinning from ear to ear. That smile's going to last you for a while, but you are no stranger to speed, obviously, with setting those records, speed records. How did this compare as well?
Well, of course, it's a very different experience, but it's you know, I mean, setting that 414 FIA record for the fastest normally aspirated car in history was fantastic. But getting to drive something with the history of this car and with the speed of this car is really special, and I'm very grateful to be able to do it. So.
Well, wonderful. You were great out there on the track, and happy to have you here at Velocity Invitational.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, Velocity's great, and appreciate people coming out and supporting it. So anyway, cheers.
We're all smiles down here. Johnny, back to you.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat appropriate there's a sign behind him that says life is better, because it is. It just got better for Charlie Neerberg. Look at that grin. He's up there in his age a little bit, but he was like a little 15-year-old, wasn't he?
It was pretty great to see, right? Especially a guy, you know, we were talking earlier, he was in the garage walking around his Formula One car wearing his Bonneville 400-mile-an-hour hat, which is kind of a life to live. If you're going to pick a life to lead, that's pretty great.
Well, you know he's not going to be frightened of the speed, that's for sure. I mean, you know, why I wanted you to come in and join us for this, Benjamin, is that none of us, Sam, myself, we're never going to experience the kind of speeds that you're going to experience in the 500 next year. You said something that a lot of drivers say. When you get up to speed, things slow down. Explain that, because a lot of people may not understand what you mean. I do, because I've spoken to a lot of drivers.
Right.
But just explain that.
You get to this point where, you know, you've done so many laps, whether it's preseason testing or, you know, a lot of testing in the car throughout the season, where you just get super comfortable with what's going on. You don't have to process, you know, I need to shift at this point, at that point. So you get in this zen almost where, you know, you're doing everything you used to have to think a lot about, but now you don't have to think about it, and now you're just in this zone where everything's just clicking, you're hitting your marks, you know, you start to notice things you would never have noticed when you weren't at that experience level earlier in your career. And that, when you get to that point, it's just so magical. You notice, you know, what the wind sounds like, you notice what the car is doing, you notice little things from the track you've never noticed before, and that just comes with experience. But back to Charlie getting out of the car with how happy he was. I know that exact feeling, and I know he will go to bed tonight, close his eyes and just process this week and how much he enjoyed it. And I know tomorrow he will be thinking, when can we go again?
Yeah.
Like that's the, the feeling.
What you just said, I was very privileged to talk to Jack Villeneuve in his Formula One days, and we were at Hockenheim, and I said the same sort of thing. Explain what it's like to me. And he said, well, here's the best example I can give you. He said, by what I mean by things slowing down. He said, I went out into I'm going in a Formula One race, and I'm in the Williams, and I'm going at 190 miles an hour. And he said, I smelt grass, and then I smelt oil, and then I smelt metal, and then an instant later I passed the crash.
You're right.
And I got it, because that is how heightened your senses are when everything slows down. And as we coming here would naturally, drive a hire car here and don't even think about it. We're talking on the phone, we're listening on the radio, and it becomes, like you say, second nature. But it's that heightened senses that really amazes me, is that you really kind of, the brain is doing things that we don't get to do on a normal level.